The subcommittee will come to order. We will sadly soon be interrupted for votes, but getting interrupted for democracy is a good thing. After recognizing myself and Ranking Member Deutsch for 5 minutes each for our opening statements, I will then recognize other members seeking recognition for 1 minute. We will then hear from our witnesses, and without objection, the witnesses' prepared statements will be made a part of the record, and members may have 5 days to insert statements and questions for the record, subject to the length limitation in the rules. The chair now recognizes herself for 5 minutes. With all the upheaval, instability, and social unrest in the wake of the Arab Spring, Morocco is designated as a major non-NATO ally and is working toward a political transition and instituting democratic reforms. 3 years ago, King Mohammed proposed constitutional reforms that would push Morocco toward democracy and reform, shifting some power that was centralized in the monarchy to the people. This new constitution was ratified a few months later and was succeeded by parliamentary elections that saw a new government formed, complete with a new prime minister from an opposition party with a mandate to have more power to govern. Of course, the political situation in Morocco is still not perfect, but it is important for us to recognize the positive steps forward. On the issue of the Western Sahara, longstanding U.S. policy, which I support, advocates for a solution based on a formula of autonomy under Moroccan sovereignty. While I recognize the advancements that the kingdom has made when it comes to human rights, certainly more can still be done. According to the 2013 State Department Human Rights Report on Western Sahara, quote, the most important human rights problem specific to the territory was Moroccan government restrictions on the civil liberties and political rights of pro-independence advocates, end quote. Morocco has made strides in expanding women's rights and has created the National Council of Human Rights to evaluate all the human rights issues. As allies, we should work together as partners to accelerate their plans to implement the constitutional reforms that urge gender equality and parity. Since becoming the very first nation to formally recognize the newly independent United States of America, Morocco and the United States have shared a strategic and bilateral relationship. It is one that has continued to strengthen over the past few years, as we have just seen Secretary Kerry return from a trip in which he took part in the second round of the U.S.-Morocco strategic dialogue aimed at deepening our bilateral cooperation on a variety of issues. Our nation signed and implemented a free trade agreement nearly 10 years ago, and there is certainly room to grow for both the Moroccan and U.S. economies through U.S. commercial investment and expansion of American businesses in Maghreb. Last year, Morocco successfully completed a 5-year Millennium Challenge Corporation Compact in which the U.S. helped Morocco increase productivity, employment prospects, investments, and economic growth. MCC concluded that the results on the compact were impressive given the complexity of the endeavor, with tens of thousands, mostly women, learning to read and write through the literacy program. So the political transition toward democracy is being paralleled by Morocco's economic transition, which is underway. But that is contingent upon Morocco remaining a safe and stable country, and that is yet another area in which our two nations collaborate closely. While the rest of the region struggles to cope with radicalization and Islamic fundamentalism, Morocco is working to foster and spread a more moderate form of Islam in the Muslim kingdom. One way Morocco promotes religious moderation and tolerance is through its nearly 10-year-old program in which it trains women in Islamic theology right alongside their male counterparts, an idea that would not only be taboo in many other countries in the region, but would likely be highly illegal. While the kingdom has not been immune to the threat of homegrown extremism, Morocco is on the front lines of fighting terrorism throughout the region. Our two nations work closely in this regard, and Morocco has proven to be an important ally. One important counterterrorism effort that we can work closely with Morocco on is the Trans-Saharan Counterterrorism Program, which aims to address the potential terrorist and security threats in Northwest Africa and the Sahel region, but we can and must do more. The administration must continue to see Morocco as the potential for what other North African transitional countries can do, and we must look to glean the best practices from its approach and see how they can be implemented in neighboring countries as well. And with that, I turn to my good friend, the ranking member, Mr. Deutsch of Florida.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thanks for holding today's hearings. Thanks to our witnesses for being here today to examine the long-standing United States-Morocco partnership. And when we say long-standing, we mean it, as Morocco was the very first country to recognize a U.S. independence. It's nice to have Ambassador Bilal here as well. Thank you for joining us. Last November, President Obama welcomed King Mohammed to the White House to reaffirm our strategic relationship and to commit to strengthen mutual cooperation on a host of significant issues. On the security front, Morocco has emerged as a critical partner in our efforts to fight extremism and promote stability in the Maghreb and in the Sahel. Morocco is one of only 2 African countries to be designated as a major non-NATO ally and is a member of the Global Counterterrorism Forum. Just last week, the United States and Morocco concluded the annual African Lion joint military exercise with approximately 350 service members, 150 Moroccan Royal Armed Forces members, and participants from various European and African partners. This level of cooperation is paramount to confronting the threats posed by groups like al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb and other al-Qaeda-affiliated militias, and to assist in our joint efforts to stem weapons transfers and narco-trafficking across the continent. It's clear that Morocco is committed to taking substantial action to prevent Northern Africa from becoming a safe haven for terrorist groups. I'd also like to highlight a unique initiative launched by the King to train imams from Mali, Tunisia, Libya, Guinea, and the Ivory Coast in Morocco. It's my understanding that the first group of 100 imams have already arrived. This is a welcome approach to curbing the spread of extremist ideology in a volatile region of the world. In addition to its leadership role on regional security matters, Morocco has pursued greater bilateral ties on economic and development issues with many of its African neighbors. In November, the King signed 18 agreements with Mali on a range of issues from microfinance to energy. But Morocco still struggles with its own economic development as the economy has been adversely affected by the economic troubles in Europe, Morocco's largest trading partner. The 2011 expansion in state spending on social programs, public hiring, and subsidies has also put a strain on the economy. Unemployment rates among youths are estimated at 22% among males and 38% among females. I am pleased that one of the pillars of USAID's new country development strategy, signed in November 2013, is addressing youth unemployment. Political reforms initiated by the King in response to unrest have seen success, and we must continue to help shepherd along reforms that will address civil society participation. USAID remains focused on helping to build civil society to include expanded roles for women in the political and economic space. The United States has also contributed to Morocco's economic growth in a significant way through the completion of a $698 million Millennium Challenge Corporation compact, and the country has now been selected for a second compact. Morocco has long played a leading role in fostering greater cooperation between North Africa and the Middle East, coordinating closely on foreign policy matters with the Gulf Cooperation Council. As chair of the Al-Quds Committee in the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, we look to Morocco to play a positive role in helping to foster continued peace talks between the Israelis and the Palestinians. We cannot forget that it was King Hassan that in the 1980s took the bold step of inviting then Prime Minister Shimon Peres to Morocco for peace talks. In that vein, many of us were concerned to see a law proposed in Parliament late last year that would have criminalized any normalization of relations with Israel. I hope that we will not see any advancement of this proposal. Finally, in advance of the King's visit last November, Chairman Ross Layton and I reiterated our support for the long-standing U.S. policy to support a solution to this dispute based on a formula of autonomy under Moroccan sovereignty. This policy has enjoyed the support of the last 3 administrations and continues to earn strong bipartisan support in Congress. With over 200 years of friendship between our 2 countries, the U.S.-Morocco partnership will only be strengthened by the launch of last year's strategic dialogue. As Secretary Kerry said last week during his visit, the strategic dialogue will contribute to the ability of the United States and Morocco to show that we value something a lot more powerful than our past, and that's the future. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses on how we can continue to help Morocco bolster its economic and security situation as we continue to enhance the U.S.-Morocco partnership. And I yield back.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deutsch, and we would like to acknowledge the presence of the Ambassador of the Kingdom of Morocco to the United States. Thank you, Mr. Ambassador Boulal, for being with us today. You are a dear friend. Thank you so much. And now I'm pleased to yield for his opening statement to the Chairman of the Subcommittee on Asia and the Pacific, Mr. Shabbat of Ohio.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for holding this hearing. We've witnessed political and humanitarian crises all around the world in recent times, but we don't hear that much from Morocco, and maybe that's not a bad thing. We're looking forward to hearing from our witnesses today and getting an update on our current relationship with the kingdom and a status report on regional political situations. We know that in 2011, King Mohammed responded to the ongoing Arab Spring by drafting a new constitution, which was subsequently adopted by popular referendum that afforded new authority to elected officials. I hope our witnesses can speak to how that reform is being carried out. Additionally, I hope our witnesses will comment on the performance of the Justice and Development Party, an Islamist party, which in 2012 won the largest number of parliamentary seats in the Moroccan election. So there's a lot to talk about, and so I'll stop talking and I yield back. Look forward to hearing our witnesses. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chairman Shabbat, and so pleased to yield to another Florida colleague, Lois Frankel, for her opening statement.
Madam Chair, it's a little lonely down at this.
Come on closer. Come on over.
I will. First of all, thank you so much for being here. I'm very interested in this. And Madam Chair, I have a number of questions, but I would like to wait to hear our witnesses' testimony, and then I'll go forward with them.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now we turn to Mr. Cotton for any opening statement he would like to make. And the subcommittee is very pleased to have a special guest with us today, Mr. Grimm, who has been a longtime friend of Morocco and has been very much involved in their issues. Please give an opening statement if you could, Mr. Grimm.
Well, thank you so much, Madam Chairwoman. As the co-chair of the Congressional Morocco Caucus, I thank you for holding this hearing and for inviting me to be with you today among my friends. So thank you. Morocco, it's already been said, everyone knows, has historically been one of America's strongest and most reliable allies. Currently, the Kingdom of Morocco is a strong partner in combating terrorism throughout North Africa, and Morocco is also the only country in the African continent in which we have a free trade agreement. So I think that's extremely important to note. You know, King Mohammed successfully weathered the Arab Spring mostly by listening to the Moroccan people and making appropriate reforms, and for this, I think he should be commended. As already mentioned, Madam Chairwoman, during President Obama's recent meeting with King Mohammed, they specifically pledged, and I quote, a shared commitment to advancing the peaceful resolution to the Western Sahara issue based on autonomy under Moroccan sovereignty. Well, I believe that the United States Congress has a responsibility to assist Morocco in achieving this resolution. The State Department, USAID, and other development agencies in the United States government must devote some of their assistance funds for Morocco to projects designed to improve the quality of life for the people of Western Sahara. I'm very excited to be here. I thank you again, and I'm looking forward to hearing from our witnesses today. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you so much, Mr. Grimm, and you're always welcome to come to our subcommittees. Thank you. And we're so pleased to welcome our excellent witnesses today. First, we welcome Mr. William Roebuck, who is the Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Egypt and Maghreb Affairs. Before this, he serves as Charge d'Affaires in Tripoli for 6 months, from January to June 2013, and as Director for the Office of Maghreb Affairs in the State Department's Bureau of Near Eastern Affairs from 2010 to 2012. Welcome, Mr. Roebuck. We also have with us Ms. Alina Romanowski. Did I do that pretty well? I've got a difficult name, so I don't worry if someone mispronounces mine. And Ms. Romanowski is currently Acting Assistant Administrator for the Middle East Bureau at the U.S. Agency for International Development. Prior to this position, Ms. Romanowski, and of course Eddie would put her name in every sentence here, served as Deputy Assistant Administrator in the Middle East Bureau, focusing on U.S. assistance programs in support of political transitions in Egypt, Libya, Tunisia, and Morocco. We welcome our witnesses, and we will begin with you, Mr. Roebuck. Your prepared statements will be made a part of the record. Please feel free to summarize them.
Thank you very much, Chairman Ros-Lehtinen, Ranking Member.
Hold that a little bit closer to your microphone for us senior citizens, to your mouth, rather.
Okay. Chairman Ros-Lehtinen, Ranking Member Deutsch, members of the subcommittee, Congressman Grimm, thank you very much. I'm honored to appear before you today to offer these overview remarks on U.S. policy to Morocco. I'm pleased to appear with my good friend, USAID Assistant Deputy Administrator Alina Romanowski. I've had the pleasure of working with Alina to further our foreign policy objectives in Morocco and in the region. And we welcome the opportunity to speak to you today and look forward to answering any questions you might have about Morocco or our policy towards Morocco. With your permission, I will request that my full statement be submitted to the record. So I'll just summarize here briefly. Madam Chairman, as you know, Morocco, as several of you have mentioned, is the first nation to have recognized the United States in 1777. It's an important and long-standing ally. We continue to enjoy a very strong bilateral relationship with Morocco, focused on promoting regional stability, supporting democratic reform efforts, countering violent extremism, and strengthening trade and cultural ties. We worked to strengthen our relationship with Morocco during the November 2013 visit of King Mohammed VI to Washington. This visit provided an opportunity for the United States to affirm our close strategic partnership with Morocco and to discuss the best means of promoting security and prosperity in the region. We continued our conversations during the recent U.S.-Morocco Strategic Dialogue, which Secretary Kerry opened in Rabat on April the 4th. This dialogue, it was originally launched in 2012, and it discussed new avenues for cooperation in the political, security, economic, educational, and cultural spheres. We're also very pleased that our new ambassador to Morocco, Dwight Bush, was confirmed in March and has arrived in Rabat. Regarding, briefly, democratic reforms in Morocco, under King Mohammed VI, the Moroccan political system has gradually liberalized. A new constitution, as several of you noted, was adopted in 2011, and Morocco's first Islamist-led government won nationwide democratic elections. The country moved forward in 2013 with calibrated but steady political and economic reforms. We have a robust dialogue with the Moroccan government on human rights and on ways in which we can support this ongoing process of political reform. Our mutual concern for peace and stability in the region means that the United States and Morocco are fully engaged on both economic and security cooperation. On economic cooperation, USAID's new country development strategy directly addresses the issue of youth employment, a key driver of instability in the region, through the creation of new vocational programs and career centers. The United States and Morocco also recently held the second U.S.-Morocco Business Development Conference in Rabat, with 58 American companies participating. Regarding security cooperation, Morocco is one of our closest counterterrorism partners. Morocco is an active member, as you have noted, of the Trans-Sahara Counterterrorism Partnership and also the Global Counterterrorism Forum. Regarding Western Sahara, the United States supports the United Nations-led process designed to bring about a peaceful, sustainable, and mutually acceptable solution to the Western Sahara question. U.S. policy towards Western Sahara has remained consistent for many years. We support the work of UN Secretary General's personal envoy, former U.S. Ambassador Chris Ross, in his efforts to find a mutually acceptable solution. Regarding education and cultural cooperation, the United States and Morocco have a long history of people-to-people ties. One recent example is Morocco's support of the J. Christopher Stevens Virtual Exchange Initiative. The initiative is designed to fuel the largest ever growth in people-to-people exchanges between the United States and the broader Middle East, and Morocco has graciously committed to donate $1 million per year over the next 5 years to this initiative. Madam Chairman, Ranking Member Deutsch, members of the subcommittee, I appreciate the opportunity to appear before you today, and I look forward to answering any questions you might have.
Thank you very much, sir. Ms. Romanowski.
Chairman Ross-Lehtinen, Ranking Member Deutsch, members of the subcommittee, and Congressman Grimm. Thank you for inviting me here today to discuss how USAID continues to support U.S. foreign policy and development objectives in Morocco. And I'm very pleased to be here also with my colleague Bill Roebuck, with whom I work closely every day. For the past 56 years, we've partnered with the government of Morocco to build a strong relationship that focuses on promoting economic growth, improving educational opportunities, and strengthening the effectiveness of civil society. During this time, we've worked to make substantial improvements in the lives of everyday Moroccans, including improving maternal and child health, constructing 2 major dams, transforming thousands of semi-arid acres into productive agricultural land, and helping Morocco's microfinance sector. We're proud and remain committed to this partnership, which is why during the visit of King Mohammed VI to Washington last year, USAID and the government of Morocco jointly launched a new 5-year country development strategy. Developed in collaboration with the Moroccan government, civil society, and the private sector, the new strategy responds to the needs of Moroccan citizens and focuses on 3 key objectives: increasing youth employment, enhancing civic participation in governance, and improving education for children in primary schools. As we focus on these 3 objectives, we recognize that we must be strategic in our investments amid an increasingly strained budget outlook. Therefore, we are focusing like never before on strengthening alliances with key regional allies and building public-private partnerships with such entities as Microsoft, Volvo, and Chevron. USAID's economic growth programs are aimed at directly addressing youth unemployment. Young people make up about 30% of Morocco's population. That's about 10 million people. Large numbers of Moroccan graduates are unable to find jobs commensurate with their education and training, while employers complain of skills shortages and mismatches. Without a trained workforce capable of increasing productivity, Morocco cannot generate sufficient prosperity through private sector growth. To address this and other obstacles, USAID is launching the Youth Employability Project. This new initiative will facilitate partnerships between government ministries, Moroccan universities and technical institutes, as well as local NGOs and the private sector, to create workforce development services for a broad range of youth. For example, we're currently working with 40 startup Moroccan businesses to locate new markets and realize sustainable revenue flows. In the democracy and governance sector, USAID is responding directly to the government of Morocco's push to strengthen political parties and increase the roles of civil society organizations in the political process. We're currently working with more than 80 local governments to create platforms for dialogue between Moroccan citizens and their locally elected officials, especially for youth and women. USAID's 3rd strategic focus in Morocco is improving primary school education. USAID has improved quality and access to elementary and middle school, especially for rural girls. Enrollment of girls in rural areas increased from 62% in 2000 to 83% in 2004. But despite these gains, Morocco still faces an overall literacy rate of only 55%. In conjunction with Morocco's own education reform effort, USAID is targeting early grade reading. These programs are designed to improve early literacy and help curb primary grade dropout rates. USAID is also implementing innovative community and school-driven development projects in over 190 schools. Finally, USAID is also responding to a critical challenge of countering violent extremism. In those programs, we target areas in Morocco where youth suffer from social, economic, and political disaffection and exclusion. These areas are known recruitment grounds for violent extremists and transnational terrorist networks. Our programs aimed at reintegrating at-risk youth into mainstream society give Moroccan youth a voice and opportunities in their communities. So in conclusion, USAID is proud of the strong relationship we have built with the government of Morocco over the past 56 years. Morocco continues to face significant challenges, but also significant opportunities. USAID programs will continue to provide assistance that will increase employment opportunities for Moroccan youth, build the reading skills of Moroccan children, and advance participatory governance in addition to countering violent extremist threats and strengthening regional stability and security. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today, and we're looking forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, and thank you to both of you for excellent testimony. We'll begin our question and answer period. As we have said, the U.S. and Morocco share strategic and dynamic bilateral relationship. In the omnibus bill that we passed in January, Congress authorized that funds designated for Morocco could also be used in the Western Sahara for literacy training programs. The bill requested a report from the State Department on this issue, and the report is due next week. Can you describe what the report will entail and if it will be delivered on time? Then on the threat of fundamentalism in the area, the threat of radical Islam and extremism spreading through North Africa and indeed throughout the entire African continent is a very real threat and a cause for alarm. And that's why the United States has put such an emphasis on working with Morocco to counter these threats. How would you describe the cooperation with Morocco on counterterrorism front? Is it as good as it can be? Is it getting better, or are you satisfied with it? And to what extent are programs like the Trans-Sahara Counterterrorism Program working? What more needs to be done on both on Morocco's side and the U.S. side to improve it? And as we discussed just last week, Secretary Kerry was in Rabat to take part in the second round of the U.S.-Morocco strategic dialogue. Can you briefly explain what came out of that latest round in the dialogue? What did we achieve? What did we accomplish? And what challenges still remain? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I'll start maybe in reverse order and work my way back up. The strategic dialogue was a big success. Secretary Kerry opened it. We had a strong team that came out from the State Department that participated in it. The purpose of this dialogue is to accentuate and highlight the strong strategic partnership we have with Morocco, and we focus on a range of areas, 3 working groups in particular: political security, economic and commercial cooperation, and education cultural cooperation. I think we made strong steps forward in all 3 of these groups. The political and security group, there was a robust discussion of Morocco's progress on domestic reforms, and also encouragement for Morocco's efforts on counterterrorism. The economic and commercial cooperation group discussed promoting regional economic integration, and also Morocco and the U.S. trade and investment relationship, and particularly trying to strengthen the benefits for Morocco of the U.S.-Morocco Free Trade Agreement. On education and cultural cooperation, as I mentioned earlier, there was a discussion of the Chris Stevens Virtual Exchange Initiative, efforts to improve on interfaith dialogue and understanding, and discussion of various educational and cultural exchange programs we have with Morocco, including, for example, the Fulbright program. On the threat of fundamentalism and extremism in Morocco and in the region writ large, I share your concern, Madam Chairman. This is not a new phenomenon. It's something that has been developing in the region over the past decade, really. It has been fed in some ways in the past several years by developments in Mali, in the wider Sahel, and also in Libya, where there's been a deteriorating security situation in the past 2.5 years. We work very closely with Morocco on counterterrorism. I think that our partnership is quite strong. We have a number of programs or a number of vehicles that we use to fund these programs. Trans-Sahara Counterterrorism Partnership is one. We use funding through NADER as well as INL money is focused primarily on strengthening Morocco's law enforcement and criminal justice system. It also provides training for law enforcement people who are involved in anti-terrorism efforts to strengthen their professionalism and strengthen their efforts with things like internet forensic investigation, the ability to do criminal investigations in general, and use these types of law enforcement tools as a means for combating terrorism.
Thank you very much, and I apologize, my time is up, but thank you very much. Mr. Deutsch is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Deputy Assistant Secretary Roebuck, just to follow up on this discussion, clearly security cooperation is a critical component of the relationship, and you had included in your testimony the figure 49% of Moroccan youth are neither in school nor in the workforce, which is a staggering figure, I think. And I know we share concerns with Morocco that some segments of that population might be vulnerable to extremist recruitment. The porous borders of North Africa make it easy to say, go be paid to fight in Syria for a few months, come back to Morocco. Can you discuss ways in which the U.S. and Morocco are working together to address that specific security concern?
The issue of foreign fighters? The United States and Morocco work closely on this. I mean, this is largely an effort that has to be directed by Morocco, but we consult with the Moroccan government closely on this issue. We recognize that it's a serious issue for the Moroccan government. A lot of it has to do with the need for a multifaceted approach to this and to a counterterrorism approach in general, and this is what the Moroccan government has in place. Part of their focus is, I would call it vigilant security efforts or operational efforts. Part of it is soft side efforts through countering violent extremism with education. Part of it is focused on education and socioeconomic assistance. I think Morocco has a broad, focused counterterrorism policy, and that's what they use to address this particular issue that you focused on, which is foreign fighters going to Syria and coming back. I can give you more detail if you'd like it, but that's the general approach that they use, and we're very supportive of it.
Okay, and I appreciate that. Ms. Romanowski, I was pleased to see USAID placing such a great emphasis in the new country development cooperation strategy on youth unemployment, which, as was mentioned earlier, is around 30%. We know the major cause of the unrest in 2011 came from disaffected youth. Morocco recently announced ambitious plans to build up industry and create 500,000 new sustainable jobs by 2020 and to significantly increase the share of industry in GDP to 23% versus the 14% today. How will USAID's programs work in concert with this new initiative? And are we going to have to realign some of our programming in light of that effort?
Thank you for the question, sir. I think we have already realigned our programs in a sense through the conversation and the dialogue we've had with the government of Morocco when we built this new 5-year development strategy. And specifically in our economic program, the employability, we are focusing on bringing universities and vocational school students and the private sector and the government to find ways that we can create, that we can improve employment skills of these young people and then offer them actual centers where they can do that and also where the private sector can come together. So this conversation and this particular program that we're focused on is doing exactly that. And it is not out of sync with, I think, supporting what their efforts are trying to do in attracting more investment.
Great. And finally, another focus of USAID is in increasing civic participation, particularly for women. And as part of a series of electoral reforms, the Parliament now has a 60-seat quota for women. And I'd like for you just to talk about the trend lines that you are seeing among women in politics. How do we get there? How do we meet those goals?
I think the trend lines in Moroccan politics for women are positive. In the last 2 visits, or 3 visits I've been to Morocco, I've met many of the women parliamentarians and politicians and those who are active in politics, both at the local level and at the national level, and both through our programs, the local governance program, and also through our political party strengthening. We are making sure that not just women, but also young women and young men are also part of reaching out and getting a more active participation. So in the many years I have been working in Morocco in this area, I see that there's a lot of interest in women to come into politics, which is always a good thing.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Madam
Thank you,
Chairman.
Mr. Deutsch. Subcommittee Chair Shabbat is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Morocco has been supportive of the Arab-Israeli peace negotiations, and recently an anti-Israel group, the Moroccan Observatory Against Normalization, an organization that is working to end commerce and international ties between Israel and Morocco, published a list of people and institutions it accuses of collaboration with the Jewish state. How has King Mohammed and the Moroccan government responded to this? Is this group a cause for concern that could negatively affect Moroccan-Israeli relations, and what steps can the administration take, or has it taken, to ensure that productive relations between Israel and Morocco continue?
Thank you, Congressman Chabot. Morocco and Israel have a long history of positive relations between the 2 countries. With regard to these developments that you have pointed to, our view is that these efforts have stalled, and they are likely to, we think they will stay stalled. We believe that the values in Morocco of religious interfaith dialogue and religious tolerance will triumph. We know that there's been efforts to move a piece of legislation which is similar to what you're referring to. That effort has stalled, and I believe that King Mohammed VI and the government of Morocco have worked very hard to foster an atmosphere of religious tolerance and interfaith understanding that will prevent such measures from moving forward.
Okay, thank you. We know there are a lot of bad actors in the region, and that Moroccan authorities have taken a proactive approach to countering the presence of extremist ideologies in the country. Could either of you comment on some of the successful elements of their counterterrorism programs?
I'll start, Congressman Chabot, and Alina, if you'd like to say something, you're welcome to. As we mentioned earlier in my testimony, the Moroccans have been very effective counterterrorism partners. They've been, and the reason that they've been effective is that they've developed a strategy that is got several different elements to it, all of which are proven elements that are effective in countering terrorism. It's not just operational, although that is a piece of it. The Moroccan government has also been very good at developing programs designed to counter violent extremism. It builds off of the Moroccan government effort and the King's effort to promote a tolerant, moderate brand of Islam in the kingdom. They have made efforts to train imams, religious leaders from neighboring countries in ways that would encourage political moderation and religious moderation, including a large number of imams from nearby Mali, where there have been a lot of problems with these extremists. So the bottom line is that they have been very effective because they've used the tools in the toolkit. In addition, they've been very active as regional and international partners cooperating on counterterrorism, both with our efforts on the Global Counterterrorism Forum and the Trans-Sahara Counterterrorism Partnership, and working with their neighbors. They've hosted a border conference for Libya, and they've done other things on foreign fighters, working with the Netherlands. So across a wide range of fronts, they've taken action on all of them, and that's why they've been effective. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Ms. Romanowski?
I would point, in addition to our broader workforce development program for young people, I would point to two other programs. One is our civic participation program that focuses on marginalized urban youth, where we are working with the local governance structures and elected officials to better focus on being responsive to the concerns of young people, particularly marginalized youth in their areas. And then the second one, which is very specific to two areas where I think we and the government of Morocco have identified as being particularly regions that struggle, and that is in the neighborhoods of Tanger and Tétouan, where we have focused a youth program that responds to those specific neighborhoods in trying to, again, bring out the voices and make the marginalized youth much more confident that they can be a participatory and a constructive voice even in their local neighborhoods.
Thank you. In the time that I have remaining, I'd like to turn briefly to trade. Some argue that the U.S.-Moroccan trade agreement limits stronger economic integration between Morocco and other African nations. Would you agree with that? And do you believe that the U.S. and Moroccan that both countries have mutually benefited from our trade partnership, and what's the future of U.S.-Moroccan trade relations look like in 17 seconds?
Thank you, Congressman. I think the free trade agreement has been a huge benefit for both sides. The United States has benefited somewhat more in the initial years than the Moroccans, but both sides have seen huge increases in bilateral trade. I do not believe that it's been a hindrance to Moroccan trade with the region, and I think they have a huge, a bright future trading with us and with other partners. They're a hub for Europe, but also for Africa, and we are working with them to strengthen the ways in which they can benefit from our free trade agreement. Thank you.
Well done. You took 41 seconds, but well done.
Very good. Thank you. I'm looking forward to reading your article, Bloomsday in Baghdad, Reading Joyce in Iraq. I'm going to look that up.
Thank you.
Ms. Frankel.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and a number of my questions were answered. Thank you. First I want to follow up on Mr. Deutsch's had a question about women, and I understand that 3 years ago, when Morocco adopted a new constitution, it guaranteed gender equality. However, I am told that there's still not the equality that the women would like. For example, I think the legal marriage age was raised from 15 to 18, but judge still can grant and do grant permission for marriages at a much younger age, and also that there are inheritance laws that still favor men. And I don't know, those are just a couple examples, but I wanted to know what your opinion is of the status of women in Morocco. And thank you for sharing with us some of the programs that USAID and others are putting into effect, I guess, to counter a possible Arab Spring and to minimize terrorism. I want to know whether there are any measures of effectiveness, any measures that to see whether or not any of these programs are being effective. And last question is and this is also a follow-up. If you could say a little bit more as to the strategic importance of Morocco, explaining why we are putting these efforts into Morocco and their relationship to their neighboring African countries.
Thank you, Congresswoman. On the issue of reform and women's position in society, I would say that it's a work in progress in Morocco with regard to reform for women's rights and reform writ large. The Moroccans embarked on a major reform in 2003 and 2004 that benefited women, the reform of their family code. It strengthened provisions relating to inheritance, divorce, child custody, and similar type provisions the 2011 Constitution strengthened further some of those reforms and made constitutionally clear the equality between men and women. But some of the issues that you raised, child marriage, the low age for women that can be married, remain a problem. And I think the Moroccan government is aware of it, but our sense is that they are reform-oriented. They want to make improvements. They're continuing to do this. And what we've seen in the last decade really is a steady move of progress. One of the human rights people who went out in 2012 noted an emerging culture of human rights in Morocco. For example, it's just another example of the type of reform that has been available just to witness out there. Just a word on the strategic importance of Morocco in the region, and then Alina, I'll let you say something if you'd like to on the effectiveness of our programs. We have a strategic relationship with Morocco because it's such an important country in that region. Its geographic location is very important. It is involved in one of the major conflict areas with Western Sahara, which is important and is creating some issues with Algeria. Morocco is a key country for us in helping to counter violent extremism. It's a critical partner in that, and it's a critical trade partner. And it's a critical country as a voice of moderate Islam. For all those reasons, it's a very important strategic partner for the United States. Thank you, ma'am.
On the issue of measuring effectiveness in our monitoring and evaluation, we do monitor and evaluate our programs, and in fact, the opportunity to do a new 5-year country strategy afforded us that opportunity to go back and review the programs that were working and where we felt they needed to really shift and keep up with what the changes that were going on in Morocco. So. And that's what caused us really to redo the economic growth piece to focus really on the workforce development. On our political and democracy and governance programs there, we realized that we needed to continue to strengthen those institutions that are part of that political process, like political parties, strengthen the local government, local governance, and work specifically, again, to continue to support the engagement of young people as well as women in politics and in the political process. We do continue and will continue to strongly monitor our programs.
Thank you
so much.
Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Frankel. And I thank Mr. Weber for being nice enough to allow me to jump him in turn because Mr. Grimm needs to get back to his subcommittee. So Mr. Grimm is recognized for 5 minutes. Thank you for visiting us.
Thank you for having me, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Weber. I appreciate the courtesy. And thank you to the witnesses. I'd like to step back for a second and just expand a little bit. The Chairwoman mentioned before about the report. Obviously, in the omnibus in January, Congress authorized the funds designated for Morocco could also be used for the Western Sahara literacy training programs. And my understanding is that report is due to Congress next week, Mr. Roebuck. Is it, as far as you know, is it on schedule to be delivered next week?
Yes, sir. We are preparing the report. It will be delivered in compliance with the law.
Is there any way you can, in a thumbnail, obviously I'm not looking for details, but just give me some idea of what to expect, any highlights of what we can expect to see in that report?
I think the report will describe our efforts to provide assistance to Morocco, and it will outline some of the areas where we have provided that assistance, you know, addressing the particular areas that the legislation wants to see more information on, and it will make the point, you know, with regard to assistance for Morocco that would be used in the Western Sahara. The United States, you know, our policy is that we should not take any actions that would be perceived as undermining our support for the UN-led mediation process, and that's a pillar of our policy, and the report would include that point. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Changing gears a little bit, as a member that lives and represents New York City, financial services industry is an area of great interest to me. So I'm very happy to see that Morocco is becoming a destination for many U.S. companies, not just as an export market, but also as a platform for exports into Africa, Europe, and broader Middle East. The new Casablanca Finance City project is poised to become, I think, one of the central economic hubs for international companies that are looking or already doing business throughout the African continent. Is there anything that you can tell us about how American companies are using Morocco, both as an export market, but also as a gateway to the entire region?
Thank you, Congressman. I would say just in short that the primary way that American companies so far are working in Morocco is to use the huge vehicle of the Free Trade Agreement, which has been in place and entered into force in 2006, which gives U.S. companies an ability to invest in Morocco and to export there. And it also, in turn, gives Morocco the opportunity to do the same here. I think that's the big benefit, and that's where we're focusing. We've also recently signed, when King Mohammed VI was here, a trade facilitation agreement, which will further shore up those efforts. Thank you.
Ms. Romanowski, anything you'd like to add?
In my most recent conversations with Moroccan businessmen, and that was Friday night while I was there for the strategic dialogue, it was very clear that they were looking to some of our programs to be able to help them build a stronger network with American companies, and they were very conscious of the fact that American companies were coming into Morocco. So I think that that's they were looking forward to it, and I think that the trend is very positive.
Great. Thank you again. I'm going to yield back the rest of my time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Mr.
Madam
Grimm.
Chairwoman.
Thanks for joining us, and thanks for your leadership with the Moroccan caucus. And now it's thrilled to recognize. Oh, Mr. Connolly, sorry I did
No,
not see
thrill.
you.
Keep going. Thrill.
What a thrill it is to recognize Mr. Connolly of Virginia for his question and answer period.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And welcome to the panel. Let me ask Mr. Roebuck, what's been the impact of the repression and military crackdown in Egypt on both the Moroccan government and, to the extent we know it, public opinion in Morocco?
Thank you, sir, for the question. It is probably, it might be a little difficult for me to assess that directly, but I will say, based on my read of the region in general, people in the region have looked very closely at what has happened in Egypt. They've taken note. I think, for example, in Tunisia, some of the political parties watched very carefully what happened in Egypt. It probably made them more flexible, maybe, in the types of national dialogue talks that they were having, and helped lead to a breakthrough with a new government and new constitution. Morocco was in a little different situation. It didn't have elections approaching in the fall when a lot of this was going on. I suspect that the people in Morocco are concerned about what's going on in Egypt, and they're looking at it very carefully. It may be causing them to reevaluate some of their conceptions about the Arab Spring and about democratic evolution, and how fast it can happen, and how some of the possible side effects of that type of turmoil. But a lot of those effects, at least in Morocco, are not as visible as they might be in some of the other countries in North Africa. But anyway, I took a stab at answering your question. Thank you, sir.
I think it behooves us to sort of look at that question, because hopefully Morocco and the Moroccan government and the Moroccan people look at that and go, that's not where we want to go.
I think that's
for lots of
correct,
different reasons with lots of different dynamics. But let me ask you about this. Where is the Polisario right now? I mean, what is their political standing? What is their appeal? What influence, if any, do they have in the western part of the country?
The Polisario is a long-standing political organization that represents residents of Western Sahara who have advocated for independence.
If you could
They
speak a
control-
little bit
Yep.
closer
You
to
need
the
to
microphone.
you need to speak close to the mic, Mr.
It was
Roebuck.
hard to hear.
Sorry.
And Madam Chairman, if I could have that 1 minute and 50 seconds back, thank you very much.
The Polisario is the political organization that advocates for independence and for a referendum in the Western Sahara. I think their influence is somewhat circumscribed in the last decade. I think...
Well, all right, Mr. Roebuck, I'm trying to get us, I'm old enough to remember when the Spanish gave it up.
Right.
And I'm old enough to remember when Polisario emerged as a
Right.
political force of some sort. What we're trying to get at here is, are they stronger? Are they weaker? Are their tentacles growing? Are they retreating? Are they actually kind of a fringe force at this point? Has the Moroccan government been able to exercise sovereignty in a meaningful and real way that is recognized and respected by the people who live in the western part of the country, or what?
Thank you, Congressman. It is a conflict that is an area that remains sort of in conflict. You know, there are two parties to it. The United States' view is that those parties, you know, have to reach a mutually agreed upon solution. In answer to your question about are they weaker, are they stronger, I think, you know, probably over the past decade or so they've gotten weaker. I'm not sure politically. I'm just speculating there. But they remain a key party in that conflict. And our view is that, you know, the parties have to reach a solution. It can't be one that's imposed. So, weaker or not, they remain a party to the conflict. And we support a process that would be a UN-led negotiations process between them and the Moroccan government. In terms of sovereignty, the territory of Western Sahara is considered by the UN as a non-self-governing territory. Morocco it exercises, you know, a non-official sort of administrator for its part of the territory, but it's not recognized by the UN as an official administering power for the Western Sahara. The key point for us is that this has got to be done through a negotiated process.
Well, just one more question, if I may, Madam Chairman. But does anybody think Western Sahara could actually function as an independent sovereign state viably?
It's a difficult question to answer. I think in terms of explaining our policy, we don't sort of reach that level of inquiry. We prefer to focus on a process that lets the parties reach a solution, rather than looking at the situation and saying, well, you know, this side of the conflict doesn't have a viable solution to it. If you see what I'm saying.
Not really. I mean, what's so hard about the United States government deciding, in our humble opinion, you know, geography X could never stand alone as a sovereign state viably? Well, why can't we make that decision from time to time? We don't have to.
Right. I suppose we could, but we haven't reached that decision.
We have not reached that decision.
No. Our policy is not based on that type of conclusion. It's based on a process where the parties who are involved in the conflict have to reach a negotiated settlement.
Does the Moroccan government agree with that position?
I might want to ask Ambassador Bouflal, who's here, but I think the Moroccan have put forward a proposal which is autonomy under Moroccan sovereignty as their solution to that conflict. We believe that's a serious, realistic, and credible proposal. It's a potential approach to address the concerns of the people of the Western Sahara and help them to live their lives in justice and dignity. So we think it's a potential approach. But in the end, we don't believe you can impose it.
Of course. All right, well, thank you.
Thank
My
you,
time is
Mr.
up.
Connolly. Mr. Weber, thank you for your patience. Thank you.
Thank you. Gosh, so many questions. Morocco received substantial U.S. development aid and bilateral trade and investment, and that has increased following a 2006 free trade agreement. All right, our trade partnership with Morocco has increased following 2006 free trade agreement. How much?
Our trade has increased about 400%.
Would you put that in dollars?
I'm not sure I have the dollar value, but it's a big increase on both sides. It's increased about 400% for the United States and about between 150 and 200% on the Moroccan side. So it's been a big benefit for both, but a bigger benefit so far for U.S. exports, and we're working with the Moroccans through our commercial law development program, through USAID, through the Millennium Challenge Corporation to even that out with some competitiveness efforts so that Moroccans can equally benefit from that.
I saw that Morocco recently concluded a 5-year, $697.5 million MCC compact, which focused on alleviating poverty and all of its goals. Successful?
I think it was very successful. Our assessment, it focused on sustainable tourism, sustainable fisheries, and agriculture. It educated with basic literacy about 40,000 relatively poor people who were involved in those 3 fields. 80% of those people were women. It helped build a tourist infrastructure in Fez, Medina, and also focused a little bit to a certain degree on financial services and a few other areas. Morocco was recently reselected for a second compact. I think many people were impressed with the way it engaged on this Millennium Challenge Corporation with its institutions and its sort of enthusiasm. And we're moving forward with shaping a second compact for Morocco.
I saw that, and then my further reading, it said that the bicameral legislature consists of Chamber of Councilors who are indirectly elected and then a Chamber of Reps who are directly elected. Explain that to me.
The chamber that's directly elected, that's the parliamentary elections that took place in 2011.
Was it like the senators in our original Constitution? They were elected by the states? Similar?
It's similar. It's a similar election. The indirectly elected people, it's more of an appointment. Basically, a lot of them are appointed.
Okay. And I noticed that, and I think one of my colleagues over on the other side alluded to the improvement of women's socioeconomic rights. It was a 2004 revision of the Family Code that aimed to improve women's socioeconomic rights. And has that been successful? Can you give me a status update? Or Ms. Romanowski, is that your bailiwick?
Well, actually, I think it's everyone's bailiwick
Okay.
of engaging Morocco and supporting Moroccan women and their rights. And through our programs, we ensure that all of the USAID programs make sure that women are included and supported. And specifically, when it comes to our democracy and governance, we're making sure that the women who get into politics have the kind of training and skills and have the advantage, and also in our economic workforce development project.
So y'all feel that it has been successful?
Yes,
and
there's
it's
a
on
lot
good
more
track.
work to get done to do. That's true across the region, but I think Morocco actually stands out as as making some.
Let me move on. I'm running out of time here. And further in my reading, it said that in talking about the division between Western Sahara and Morocco, that there were some who were concerned that Western Sahara would actually become a training ground for terrorists, and that they were concerned about those coming back from Iraq, and even that Western some of those Western Sahara potential terrorists had been trained in Western Europe? Is that right? Are you aware of that, Mr. Roebuck?
Thank you, Congressman, for that question. I'm not aware of that report. Our general assessment of the Western Sahara is as follows. It is a large space. We don't think that it's good for, for a space that big to be an ungoverned space. That's why we support the UN being there with the MINURSO organization. But in terms of what you're talking about, which is some sort of ties between terrorists and the people in the West, to our knowledge, we're not aware of significant terrorist activity in the Western Sahara, and we're not aware of links between, for example, the Polisario and terrorist organizations like the ones you cited.
Okay, and then one final question, if I may, Madam Chair. It talks about recent congressional actions. Morocco and the Polisario and advocates on both sides regularly appeal to Congress to support their positions on the Western Sahara. Many members of Congress support Morocco's position asserting sovereignty over the territory. So I don't mean to put you on the spot, but how many members of Congress support that position? Do you know?
I do not, sir. I don't know exactly what the numbers would be. As I mentioned to Congressman Connolly, I mean, our view is that the issue of sovereignty is something that should be resolved through negotiations with the parties.
Okay.
Both sides have put forward proposals. We think that the Moroccan proposal is very serious, credible, and realistic, but in the end, we can't impose it.
Okay, well then, forgive me, one more question. Does the UN recognize a Western Sahara as a what?
It's a non-self-governing territory.
A non-self-governing territory.
That's the official legal definition the UN uses to describe it.
I think some might describe Congress as that. So, Madam Chair, I yield back.
Thank you so much to our witnesses. Thank you to the audience, and especially to our members. And with that, the subcommittee is adjourned. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.